Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Good day and welcome to the show. Glad to have you guys here this Sunday. This story I'm going to tell you guys today come from 1982. And back in 1982, they had a World's Fair in Knoxville, Tennessee. And it was a big exposition. It was really something. Now, our family, we used to take summertime trips to the Smoky Mountain National Park. And we often went to towns in and around the Smoky Mountain National Park, like Pigeon Forge, Tennessee, and places like that to sightsee and stuff. And we stayed in campgrounds and stuff. And we did that because we lived in Florida and it was terribly hot summers. And to avoid the heat, we would travel up to the Smoky Mountain National Park, and it was nice and cool up there, especially in the mountains. And we enjoyed vacationing there sometimes. And, this is back in the days when people used to take, we used to take as many as 2 vacations a year. Oftentimes a vacation would be at least 2 weeks, sometimes 3 weeks, sometimes even a month. But this was back when America was America. And this is back when people had a little bit of extra money in their pocket. Money went so much further. My father was the only one that worked in the family, and he made ample amount of money in his wages where we could not only take a couple vacations a year, but we could save money in our family, and stuff. But that was a different time than it is now. Now your husband has to work, the wife has to work. Soon the kids will be having to work, the way it's going. Just saying. But at any rate, this was a easier, better time back then, way back in 1982. So we traveled up to Tennessee. And my mother said, well, there's a World's Fair going on in Knoxville, Tennessee. And I don't know what the mood that was in the air or what between me, my mother, and my father, but it was just a happy summer camping trip to Knoxville to go to the World's Fair. Well, I don't know whose decision it was, but when we were in Knoxville attending the World's Fair, we had so much fun. We stayed for like 4 days or something and went to the World's Fair for like 4 days in Knoxville. We were camping in a campground. I don't know whose decision it was. Who come up with the idea? Maybe my father, maybe my mother, it might have been me. We said, let's buy a piece of property here and let's make it a little summer house. So the idea took hold, and my dad contacted a real estate agent and started looking at some properties in the area, stuff that he could afford, land. And we spotted this piece of land. It was not too far from town, the town of Sevierville, Tennessee, just outside of town. And it was really had all these lovely trees on it, big tall trees. It was about 8 acres of land, and it was a hill, basically, and the piece of land included the top of the hill, which was roughly about an acre up on top of the hill. And all the rest of that piece of land was all side hill. It was all the downside slopes of that particular hill. And there was a little road that led up to the hill, a little dirt gravel road. And my father, he was just like, right on. And I was too. We were all excited. Well, let's buy this piece of land. We did. And back in those days, you could buy a piece of land. Maybe nowadays, you have going to buy a house or something, and it takes months to do the closing and everything else. It takes a long time. But back in those days, if you paid cash for a piece of land, they could do the title search and they could have it in your possession in just a matter of days. It wasn't like there wasn't near as much rigmarole as there is now. So sure enough, I think we were staying in a campground not far away, and within just a few days, we owned the property. So what were we going to do with it? Well, my dad said, well, let's build a cabin. I was all for it, and well, what kind of cabin are we going to build? Well, my dad said it's always good to make optimal use of your roof, because he said the most expensive parts my dad had quite a bit of construction experience. I didn't have much back in those days. Construction experience. I didn't really have a lot of know-how. I knew how to drive a nail. I knew how to cut a board. But as far as building a house, I was still a little bit green in those days. I was only 20 years old. And, my dad, well, let's see, he must have been close to 50. He was in his late 40s or something, along in there. But I said, well, what tools do we have? Well, we brought a chainsaw with us in the truck, and we had a hammer, and we had a handsaw, and we had a few other things, not much. We didn't have any shovels, and we didn't have any rakes, or we didn't have an axe. A lot of things we didn't have. So we said, well, if we're going to build a cabin, we got to have a few more tools than this. Just a chainsaw and a hammer and a bit of rope and stuff, and tools to fix the truck. That's not really going to do it. So we drove in to the hardware store in Sevierville, and they had a lovely hardware store there. We went in, we got talking to the guy, and people were very friendly there in Sevierville, Tennessee, and I think they still are today, to tell the truth. It's a kind of a small town, and people are probably very friendly there today. I don't know. I haven't spent a lot of time in Sevierville as of lately, but I did spend a few days there last year, or was it a year and a half ago? At any rate, but this was back in 1982. So we went into the hardware store. My dad got talking with the guy that owned the hardware store, and he asked him, what kind of deals can you make me on, if we buy a few things here, do we need to build the cabin? So I remember my dad, he bought different kinds of nails. He bought, most of them were bright finish nails, and he was buying them by the 50-pound boxes. And back in those days, I think it was like $20 for a 50-pound box of nails. So he bought some 2-inch nails. He bought some 2.5-inch nails. He bought some 3-inch nails. He bought some 3.5-inch nails. He bought some 4-inch nails. He bought all these boxes of nails. He must have bought about 4, maybe 5 boxes of nails. It was less than $100. And then he went over to the hardware section, where the tools are and stuff. And we were looking through the tools, and I said, I like this. This pickaxe. It had a broad side on one side and a pointed side on the other. So how much was it? Well, I think it was like $10. My dad said, well, we'll take that. Had a big bright orange head on it. And it had a nice solid handle on it, My dad said, we need an axe. And he grabbed an axe, and I think it was like $12.99 or something like that, And a shovel. I think the shovel was like $6.99 or something like that, These are 1982 prices, by the way, guys. So we weren't even up to $200 yet, We had like 5 boxes of nails, 50-pound boxes of nails. We had, and so then my dad, he went and got some string, and he got a line level, and he went and got a few other things, and I think the bill come up to around $200. So we paid that. And then my dad said, well, we need wood to build this cabin. And I said, yeah, we need quite a bit of wood. Where are we going to get wood? Well, we don't want to pay a lot of money for it. We were talking, We can get wood cheap enough. You don't want to have to pay a fortune. So my dad says, I know. There must be some mills around here, sawmills and stuff. So we got in the phone book. We got the Sevierville phone book, and my dad, I think he went back to the hardware store, and he asked him, can I borrow your phone book for a minute or two? And they said, well, sure, here. And my dad opened up the phone book, and he started looking through all these numbers of sawmills. And he didn't really see anything he liked, so he asked the guy at the hardware store, is there any mills around here? And yeah, the guy says, yeah, there's just a mill just up the road here. He says, it's an old mill. he said. And he said the fellows that work on it, he said, work on that mill. He said, it's a sawmill, but he says, and he gave my dad directions to this mill, and he gave him the phone number. So my dad, he got on the phone, and these guys answered, and they were really, really guys who were. These were guys that my dad was talking to, that were locals who I would surmise, looking back at the situation, that there are a couple brothers, and I would say that they had probably, now can't say this for sure, but I would say that they were born and raised in the area and that they had never been probably never been further than their own county. But they lived a ways out, and so my dad got directions. Says, okay, we're going to go out and visit these fellas. Called them up on the phone. They said, sure, we can fill an order for whatever size order you want. I mean, he says, we can fill it. We'll do a good job. We'll cut your boards for you and everything. My dad says, oh, great. I says, we'll come out and see you. We'll want to take a look at your mill, my dad said. So we didn't have nothing on the property yet. We were driving out there every day and we were doing a few things, but really not into construction yet. We were just kind of like preparing and going out and looking at the property and deciding where we were going to put the cabin and stuff. I think my mother said, well, why don't you put it up on top of the hill? And I said, well, no, why don't we put it on the side of the hill? And my dad says, well, let's put it down near the base of the hill. And we were a little bit undecided about where we were going to put this cabin. Well, how big would we build a cabin? We were talking about that too, saying, well, we need a place to cook on the first floor, need a kitchen, and we need a little living room. My dad says, well, that sounds good. And what else will we have? Well, I said, let's put a couple bedrooms on the upper floor. Oh, that sounds good. Well, how big do we need for that? My dad was saying, well, probably he said, let's see, and he kind of paced it off, and he figured, well, if we put a kitchen over here, and we put a living room over here, and he went and did a few more paces this way and that way on a piece of land on the property. He was walking back and forth, and talking to my mother and me, and he's saying, well, a kitchen be about here, and then he got tape measure out, and he started to measure this way and that way. He said, well, probably about, I guess about 20 feet this way would be good enough. And he measured it the other way. Oh, about 20 feet this way. Oh, why don't we make it 20 by 20? That sounds about right, So we got discussing it, and he said, well, shouldn't we have a foundation first? And we decided where we were going to put it. At that point, we said, well, on top of the hill's too hard. Let's just cross off that idea because the hill's about maybe 100 feet tall and it's pretty steep. And how are we going to get all that wood up there on top of the hill, from the flat spot on top of the hill? No, okay. Well, we won't put it there. So then we decided, well, about halfway down the hill, well, that's still a good climb. It's about 50 feet and the hill's pretty steep. And how are we going to get a foundation there? No, let's not put it there. Okay, well, what about down near the base of the hill, about 10 feet up the side of the hill? And we all decided on it. Yeah, okay, let's put it there. Okay, so we decided, well, we're going to build our foundation there, about 10 feet up on the side of the hill. Well, how are we going to get a foundation there? I said to Pop, Pop says, well, I don't know. He said, we're going to have to let's put piers into the hill, the side hill. What we'll do is, he said, we'll put big logs. We'll cut logs and we'll put them in and we'll space them about we'll put two in the front, we'll have to be one on each corner, he said. I said, yeah. And then we'll have to have a couple in the middle. Yeah. So it'd be 4 across the front to sit the foundation on, 4 across the back, and about 4 down the middle. My dad said, yeah, that's about right. And we were looking, and we said, well, we might as well start. Dad says, yeah, okay. So we got the shovel that we had bought at the store, and we started digging in underneath those big trees. So it was summertime then, early summer, and we had like a canopy of forest growing over us, this enormous trees that were on the property. There's just constant shade underneath those trees. We started working. Started digging the first hole. I'd dig a little while on it and get it down about a foot deeper. And then Pop would hop on it, and he'd start digging a little while on it. While I sat on the stump watching him, and he'd take it down a foot deeper, the hole. And then I'd get on it again. I'd take it down a foot deeper. Well, so we did that. We did the first hole, and we did another one, and another one. And we did about a dozen in all. Right on the lines where Pop had drawn he had a string, and he'd drawn it tight with a stake, and we were putting the holes right on those lines. So we dug like 12 of these holes. We were digging all day long that day. Put these holes in. So then we said, well, we need the posts to sit in the holes that the house can sit on. Pop says, okay, yeah. One of the tools we brought with us, we brought a chainsaw. And we had a cable and ropes inside the truck. And we had one of those ratchet pullers, So we looked through and we said, well, we need a tree that's the right size around for these posts. Pop says, yeah, we do. I spotted a tree on the side of the hill, about 40 feet up the side of the hill. I said, Pop, that looks like the right size tree. And yeah, he looked at it and he says, yeah, look how long it is. It's tall. It was about 70 or 80 feet tall, but it didn't have a branch on it all the way up to the top of that canopy of trees and all that green forest up there and all that green canopy up there, No limbs, because the trees were fighting for sunlight, and they had grown up tall and straight in there on that side hill. So me and Pop climbed up the side hill with the chainsaw. And I don't remember exactly how we did it, but we got a cable around or a rope around the tree as high as we could push the rope. I think what we did was we tied the rope around the tree and took a long stick or something, slid it up as high as we could on the tree. I think we got it up about 15 feet up the side of the tree, maybe 20 feet, this rope. We attached it to the cable puller, and we put some tension on it. And then I got the chainsaw going, and I notched the tree, and then I made the back cut, and down she come. And we used that rope to slide the tree down the side of the hill, all the way down to where we had our holes dug in the ground in this red clay, or, well, I don't know, I can't remember if it was bright red. It was maybe a little bit of an orangish colored clay or whatever that we were digging in. So when we cut these, we took the chainsaw, then we cut these pieces that were the size we were looking for. I think they were about 3.5 feet long or 4 feet long, each one. And they were logs, 4 foot long, roughly about, well, maybe 5 feet long logs, maybe quite a sizable diameter. They were big and heavy to carry, and me and Pop, we carried them one by one. We put them in the holes, and we tipped them right side up and kind of swooshed them back and forth a little bit inside the holes to where they were kind of like level. Put the level on them, made sure that they were all level inside the holes, but there was nothing around them. No, we didn't put any earth in around them. They were just sitting there inside the holes. And then what we did was took a string, we took a line level, and we made marks on the logs, all the logs, to make sure they were the same height. And we chopped them all off with the chainsaw so they were all level. So we had all these logs inside the holes, and they were all level on the top of the logs. And then we said, well, we're going to have to put cement around them. Pop said, yep. So we took the truck back into town. We found a cement place that sold cement, bags of cement, and sold bags of sand and stuff. And we bought a whole bunch of that stuff. We took it back to the property. Bags of cement, bags of sand. And I think we bought a wheelbarrow too at the same time. Took it all back to the property, and we started mixing cement by hand and filling pouring the cement in around these logs. And I think we spent 4 or 5 days mixing all that cement and pouring it around those logs. And we had it all done. So we must have been about a week into the project. And then we decided we needed our lumber, so we were going to make a trip out to see these fellas. So we all hopped in the truck, me, my mom, my dad, and we started to follow the directions that was written down to go out and see these fellas. So we drove out of town, and we started to drive around the hollow, and we started to drive, and the roads, were good, we hit this road, and we got to turn on this road. Okay, let's turn off on this road. So we turned off on this road. And the road stayed paved for a little while, and then it hit dirt. All right? So, you sure you went the right way, Mom said, Dad was, yeah, I'm following the map correctly. It's this road. I can't remember what the name of the road was, but it was turned to dirt. As we drove along, the road started to get narrower and narrower, and we started to climb up the side of a mountain. And then he come to the next road. He said, you got to turn on this road. Yeah, okay, this is the right road, and there's a little sign there, and it was made of wood, and it had paint on the side of it, painted the name of the road. And turn off on this road. So we were climbing up around the side of another mountain, down a hollow, and the road got narrower and narrower until it's just one lane. Then it wasn't even narrow, it wasn't even wide enough for the truck then, because the bushes on either side of the road were scraping on the sides of the truck as we went through, and there's big potholes. And my mom started to get nervous. She said, well, how are you even going to turn around to my dad? My dad says, no, we'll be okay. We'll keep on going. Went all the way around the side of this big mountain. Come around the other side of the mountain, started to climb up again. We went down the road further, and the road started to widen out a little bit again, And there it was. It was the only place there. And it was in the middle, absolutely in the middle of nowhere. And there's a few dogs running around. There was a sawmill there. Yeah. And you could tell they'd been working. There's fresh sawdust everywhere. You could tell they had been. My dad honked the horn. And here a couple of fellas come out. Brothers, I think they were. And I think if I remember right, this was a long time ago. I was just a young man then, only 20 years old. And that was over 40 years ago. So, but I think they were wearing coveralls, both of them. The brothers come out, And I don't think they had any shirt. I think all they were wearing was just coveralls and boots or whatever, They come out and they come up to the truck. And they look like that they definitely were local and probably never been past that little area where they grew up, probably. But they were local boys, and they were good fellas, nice and friendly. My dad got talking to him, and he says, I'm going to put in an order for you guys. Get some lumber. I said, oh, sure, yeah, we can do that. Well, he says, what I want, I want, I forget how many board feet. I think he said like 3,000 board feet. Something like that. I can't remember what it was. And I can't remember exactly what the price was back then. I think it was like something like 50 cents a board foot or something like that. It was certainly a lot cheaper than it is today. I think it was 50 cents a board foot. So I think a board 1,000 was, I think my dad put an order for 3,000 board feet. It'd be like $1,500 worth of lumber. And I'll tell you, they were some glad to get that order. Get right on it. Yes, we will get right on it. We'll start cutting it for you tomorrow morning. Yes. They're writing down exactly the boards my dad wanted. He wanted this size, and this size, and this size. Rough cut boards. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. We'll cut them for you. Start cutting them tomorrow morning. How many of this size do you want? Okay, yeah. My dad was writing it down on a tally list, and the brother was writing it down on his tally list. What my dad needed, the whole order. So they got it all written down. And I'm going to tell you, we drove back home there, or I should say home. We drove back to the property, and I remember we were camping out on the property. We had that big orange tent that we had, with the big Coleman tent. It had all the poles, you set it up. It was an enormous tent. It was like, I think it was like 16 feet long by 16 feet wide, or maybe 12 feet long by 12 feet wide. But anyway, it was a big old tent we used to have. It was real campus. We had it set up on the property on a flat spot near the base of the hill where we had our truck parked not far away. And we were staying there. And I think I had a tent too, a pup tent, back then. My parents were staying in a big tent. And we had everything we needed. We had water in the truck, and we had food there, and a couple big coolers. We had our food there, and everything. We were set up good. We already built a fireplace there on the property, and we were having fires every night. We were just basically camping out there. So 48 hours went by after we went and visited the brothers. And I think my dad called them, and they all got directions on how to get there. And 48 hours went by. And this old truck come in. And it was something like, the car they had on the Beverly Hillbillies, the one the grandmother used to sit up in the top, and Jethro used to drive, a really old truck. Well, this was a truck. It was a flatbed truck, but it was a really old flatbed truck. But it worked good. And here they come, put, down around the side of the dirt road where we were. They come driving up, and they parked their truck. And they had I think it was 800 board feet or something like that on the back of the truck, all stacked nice and neat, all these different boards. And a lot of the boards were pine. Some of the boards were made out of, there's all different kinds of wood they were using. But they were wide boards. And they were all rough cut. 1 inch thick boards were rough cut exactly an inch thick. And the 2-inch boards were cut exactly 2 inches thick. And they're nice looking lumber. But it was all it wasn't all the same kind of lumber. There was all kinds of different kinds of trees. Some of them were hardwoods that were cut. Most of them were softwood. There was a bit of hardwood mixed in, And there was a bit of popple mixed in there, too. They cut some popple, too, But the popple wasn't so good. It was a little bit more undesirable wood. But Dad and me, we didn't care too much. We were sliding the lumber off and stacking it down near the base of where we were building this cabin. So we made nice, neat stacks of our lumber. And they thanked us, and I think my dad paid them for the first 1,000 board feet, I think, or whatever, And I think he gave them about $400 or something for the first load. And sure enough, every couple days they would come in with another load. So by that time, our cement was getting hard around our posts, and our foundation was looking good, It was getting nice and firm, and the cement was hard enough where you couldn't chip it with your finger. If you go over, you could scratch it, but it was it was like nice and hard, cured. The cement was getting cured after a few days around all the pilings that we had put in, those big posts that we put in to sit the house on. So then we started to build a platform out of the lumber that they had bought. 2-inch lumber. We had like 2x10s. And we started to put the 2x10s across from one big post to the next big post, and we were building a platform. Like we were using them as floor joists. We were driving spikes in them, And then we started working on them. We started building the floor on top of that. And we cut the boards with the chainsaw. We cut the boards 4 or 5 boards to a time, My dad would take his tape measure and he'd measure out, say we were going to cut 12 feet. We'd lay like a half a dozen of those 12 foot of those boards on the thing, and we'd cut them all 12 feet right at the same time. We'd just saw right down through them, and get good with the chainsaw. We could cut a nice straight. We'd make a nice straight square mark and cut down through a whole bunch at the same time. Maybe 3 boards at the same time, and get a nice straight edge on them, nice square straight edge on them. And then we'd take them over to the platform, start using them for floor joists. Cutting the bigger boards first. And then we started to build the floor in the place on top of the platform after we got that built. And we started to use the 1-inch boards. Mostly we were picking through and taking the boards that were made out of the more undesirable boards, the boards that had more knots in them, and they weren't really the boards we were looking to use for the walls, They were, and we were just nailing away on those boards, And we were working at a ton of other things too at the same time around the place. But we were building a cabin. And so along in that time too, as we were starting to make good progress on the foundation, and we already had a floor in, and we put in a pair of stairs so that we could walk up on top of this platform. We said, well, what are we going to use for the roof? And we decided on tin. We had to find somebody who was going to sell us the tin, so we went back into the hardware store, and they ordered it in for us. It was going to take a few days to get it delivered. So things were progressing along quite nicely. Now, I'll tell you what happened. I got more of this story for you guys in the next Sunday. I'm going to talk about this more and what happened. So you guys, thank you for listening, and we'll catch you guys in the next show. Bye-bye.